And that is called the rock of foundation, from which God created and founded the whole world. According to Jewish tradition, the Holy of Holies of both temples stood over there on top of that rock, the tip of a hill of Mount Moriah. And so basically where you see the Dome of the Rock, that's where the temple was. Although the Herodian temple, the late Second Temple era temple, was around 3 times the dimensions of the temple that you see there today. The Dome of the Rock that you see there today. I would like to use this opportunity that we're here on Temple Mount to give you a little bit of insight into why Temple Mount is holy to Islam. Why is this place run today by Muslims and it's so important for Islam? There's 2 levels for understanding the connection. The baseline is that early Islam accepted the major tenets of both previous monotheistic religions, Judaism and Christianity. And so if a place is holy to Judaism and or Christianity, it's automatically holy to Islam. The same goes for our holy people. Jesus is considered a prophet, a Nabi Isa, the prophet Jesus. Moses is also a prophet, a Nabi Musa, the prophet Moses, and so on. So all of our important people and the Christianity's important people are also important to Islam, and the same goes for the holy sites. So it's very typical in the land of Israel that you see a holy site which is holy to Judaism and or Christianity, and it's on a mosque. There's a mosque there, okay? For example, yesterday we were on top of Mount of Olives. I pointed out the Chapel of Ascension, which is actually in the grounds of a mosque. This is very typical, especially in Jerusalem. So that's the baseline. This is holy for Judaism, it's holy for Christianity, hence it's also holy for Islam automatically. There is a second level, an interesting level to this connection, and that has to do with chapter 17, verse 1 of the Holy Quran. Now check that out. That's Islam being oppressive and trying to make the life of people who are not Muslims on Temple Mount more difficult. I'm going to the politics, but okay, they don't want us here. As far as they're concerned, there never was any history or heritage in Jerusalem and Temple Mount before Islam came to life, and they're completely and totally intolerant. The only holy site in the land of Israel that is not controlled by the state of Israel, but is controlled by the Muslims, is a place that has a very strong religious oppression and intolerance, and that's right over here, and that's part of it. Okay, why did I come all the way here? Why didn't I stop talking over there? Because over there, they're roaming around. The big brother is listening. They come, they listen to what I'm saying, they argue with me. I almost got kicked off Temple Mount last time I was here. They're making our life difficult. Anyway, now to return to the Quran. Chapter 17, verse 1 of the Quran reads as follows. Glory be to him who had his servant travel by night from the hallowed mosque to the further mosque whose surroundings we have blessed. Okay, this verse makes the connection of holiness to Jerusalem and Temple Mount to Islam, and Temple Mount is considered the 3rd holiest site to Islam after Mecca and Medina. And I ask you, is everything okay? You understand what I just recited to you from the Quran? You understand it? You do? Okay, then let's go. No, really, seriously. Seriously. I'm going to recite it again. Glory be to him who had his servant travel by night from the hallowed mosque to the further mosque whose surroundings we have blessed. Is there anything not understood about this verse? Is there anything that's missing from this verse, do you think? Glory be to him, that would be God, who had his servant, that would be Muhammad. Travel by night, okay, in a minute we'll discuss how exactly he traveled. From the hallowed mosque, that would be Mecca, to where? To where? The Dome of the Rock? Does it say that? It doesn't say the Dome of the Rock. It doesn't say Jerusalem. It says the further mosque. How do we know it's here? Ladies, trust me on this. What's missing in this verse is one word: Jerusalem. Not only does Jerusalem not appear in this verse, it doesn't appear anywhere in the Quran. Not even once is the name Jerusalem mentioned in the Quran. And so that's the problem. How do we make the connection from this very obscure verse, which is not very understandable, without the name Jerusalem? How come Jerusalem and Al becomes the third holiest site to Islam based on this verse that I just recited to you twice? Okay, not mentioned. So here's the thing. In every religion, you have the written scripture and you have the oral law. The law that interprets the scripture, that implements the scripture. Like we have the Mishnah. We discussed this the other day at Sepharis. They also have an oral law. They call it the Hadith. The Hadith is basically taking stories from the lifetime of Muhammad and using the story to interpret obscure scripture in the Quran. Like this verse 1, chapter 17, is not quite understood. Okay? So, the hadith that has to do with this goes as follows. Muhammad was lying in his bed in Mecca, and the archangel Gabriel comes to him. You know, he's the angel who's always mixing up what's going on here on earth with all us humans, and he wakes him up, and he presents him with a mythological beast called El-Burak, which means the blessing. El-Burak is like a small horse with wings and the head and face of a beautiful woman. Okay? Muhammad gets on El-Burak, and with one jump, they land here on Temple Mount. Okay? And, wait, it's not over yet. And the angel Gabriel gives Muhammad a choice. You can drink from this jar of milk, or you can drink from this jar of wine. And Muhammad picks to drink from the milk. And so the angel says, now I know that you are the true prophet. And to this day, Muslims do not drink wine or anything that's derived from the grapes. They don't drink alcohol, or at least they're not supposed to drink alcohol. And then Muhammad ascends to heaven. Now, this whole event is called the Isra and the Mi'raj, the night travel. He traveled by night, and the ascension to heaven. He goes to heaven to meet the big boss. Now, in Hebrew, we say Elohim, God. In Arabic, they say Allah. Allah, Eloha, Elohim. It's all one and the same. Okay? It's just, it's Arabic, but it means the same thing. So he goes for a meeting with Allah. On the way, he meets the prophets. He meets Jesus, he meets Moses, and Joseph, and David, and everybody. And then he goes and he has his meeting with God. And God tells him, your people have to pray 50 times a day. Okay. This is what you're telling me? Fine. He starts going back down. On the way, he meets Moses again, and Moses asks him, okay, what's the deal? What's up? And he says, well, God says my people have to pray 50 times a day. And so Moses says to him, what? Your people have to have a life. If they're going to be praying 50 times a day, they're not going to have a life. Go upstairs and negotiate. Okay. He goes back up to God, negotiates. God gives him a 5-prayer discount. Now they have to pray only 45 times a day. Fine. Muhammad starts descending. He meets Moses again. Moses asks him what was the result of the negotiation. And he says, God says we don't have to pray more than 45 times a day. Moses says, that's not good. That doesn't help you very much. And you're an Arab from Arabia. You should be a master of negotiation. Go and renegotiate. Anyway, to make a long story short, he goes up and down, and each time he gets a 5-prayer discount, he ends up with 5 prayers a day. And to this day, the Muslims pray 5 times a day. He comes back here to the Temple Mount. On top, all this takes place from the rock of foundation underneath the dome of the rock. And he gets on El-Burak, and he flies back home to Mecca. Now, in early Islam, actually, when you think about what they're saying, I think that every one of you can totally agree with what they're saying. Allahu Akbar literally means God is great. Yeah. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah.
No, you don't. God is great.
Yes.
Okay? All the time. Anyway, he goes back to Mecca. He goes back to bed. It's viewed in early Islam to be a spiritual journey, a vision, not an actual physical journey. One version says that when he got back to his bed in Mecca, his bed was too warm. Another version says that when he got out of bed, he knocked over a pitcher of water. When he got back, the water had not yet dropped to the floor. So it happened like this, in the blink of an eye. But obviously this is a vision that Muhammad believed in. And so this is the basis for making Jerusalem and Temple Mount holy to Islam. But this is also, it has, I would say, like many things in history, or in religious history, it also has its basis in politics and geopolitics. At this period, we're talking about a period when we have Muslim rulers in Damascus called the Umayyads, and they are not friendly with the Muslim rulers in Mecca. And they didn't want their people to go all the way to Mecca to worship and to go on pilgrimage and pay taxes and swear allegiance to the guys in Mecca. They wanted a place close to home that will be holy, where the people can go on pilgrimage here instead of going all the way to Mecca. And so they basically developed this hadith about Muhammad and Temple Mount, and they make a lot of good public relations for Jerusalem, and presto, Jerusalem becomes the third holiest site to Islam. Okay? In the year 685, the Dome of the Rock is built by the Muslim ruler, the Umayyad ruler called Abdul Malik. 15 years later, his son Al-Walid builds the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. In Arabic, Masjid Al-Aqsa, which means the mosque at the edge or the further mosque. Okay, so this is the Halo Mosque is Mecca, the further mosque is here. And so this is how basically Temple Mount gets built up and becomes the third holiest site to Islam. Okay? Now, the Mosque of Al-Aqsa is similar to the original, but not quite, because the original Mosque of Al-Aqsa, well, the first one was built of wood, but that didn't last very long, and then later on it was expanded. It was actually much wider. You can see that it has 7 aisles. You have 7 archways, each one corresponds to an aisle. Well, the original one was much wider. It wasn't as far north of this, but it was much wider. But in Israel, we have earthquakes. The Jordan Valley Rift, which we traveled in, is a tremendous geological fault line, and there's earthquakes all the time, and every 80 to 100 years, statistically speaking, we have the big ones. And so that structure is hanging in the air because it's on stilts. It's not on the ground. You saw the wall down below. It's in the air, and when the earth sways, Temple Mount sways, and that structure gets damaged. And so it was damaged many times over the years and rebuilt, and the aisles on the side were wiped out, and just these aisles were left, so it's a little bit different. The Dome of the Rock, on the other hand, is original. Why? Because it's sitting right on top of bedrock. Okay? And so that is original. Now, granted, the golden plating was donated by King Hussein, may he rest in peace, and the beautiful blue mosaics, which are Persian mosaics, were added on and touched up in later years. But the structure itself, as a structure, is original. It sits right on top of the rock itself, the rock of foundation, and it's concentric, 8-sided, 3 circles. Does that remind you of something? Remember the foundations of the church we saw in Capernaum the other day? It was concentric, 8-sided, 3 circles. It's the same style. There are those who say that the architect who was commissioned to build the shrine, it's not a mosque, it's a shrine, was actually a Byzantine architect who basically copied the style that was used for churches for here, but it actually fit because the holy place is the center where the rock is, the tip of the hill. And so it fits to build something which surrounds it and is centralized towards the holy spot. And so that's what we have over there. Now, what we're going to do is we'll go up to view of Temple Mount. I'll just point out over there, beyond that tree over there, there's one interesting structure, which is called El-Kas, which literally means the cup or the chalice, because it's shaped like a chalice. Well, I wouldn't say a wine chalice because these are Muslims and they don't drink wine, but let's say a beautiful water cup. It serves as a fountain for purification. In every mosque in the world, you will always find in the courtyard, entrance to the mosque, somewhere you will find water, a water source for washing and purification. They wash their hands and their feet. It's a special process, a ceremony, before they go into the mosque. And so you'll find a water fountain of one sort or another in every mosque in the world. In this case, there was a Muslim ruler in the 14th century called Tankiz, and his heraldic symbol was the chalice, and so he built that, and it's shaped after his heraldic symbol, the symbol of the cup. In this case, I would say the water cup. Okay? Here's what we're going to do. We'll go this way, and then we'll come up the stairs and get to Temple Mount from the east, and that way we get a view of Mount of Olives on the other side of the valley, okay?